What's going on, everybody, and welcome back. Today we are diving deep into this fourth episode of It, Welcome to Derry. Last week we saw Hollerin throw a serious curveball at It as Shaw, with the backing of the government, continued to play a dangerous game trying to weaponize the cosmic horror. Well, in this episode we see the seeds of payback are going into motion, and It is starting to pull the strings that tie directly into the town's most deepest and darkest history. With all that said, time to take a trip into memory lane and unpack everything that happened in this episode. Full spoilers ahead. We open this episode with a classic shot of our crew, Lily, Ronnie, Will, and Rich, on their bikes, fresh off their terrifying encounter in the cemetery, armed with what they believe will be irrefutable evidence as they head straight into Derry Police Station. Confident they have what they need to clear Hank's name and exposing the terrifying truth of what lies beneath their own town as we watch them hand over the photos to Bowers and the other officers. You can see the hope in their eyes and their proud smiles. This is their moment. This could prove everything. The officers, however, look with confusion, but not for the reasons the kids expect. Instead of seeing the horrors they've experienced the night before of Pennywise and the ghostly forms of Teddy and Susie, all the police see is basically nothing. The kids try to point out the photo showing the silhouette of a clown, and the officer thinks it's just a simple photo of a statue.
No, are you blind? It's a clown.
You watch your tone, young lady.
As the kids' smiles slowly fall, replaced by utter disbelief and disappointment. It's here they're starting to realize that maybe the adults can't see it. As of right now, Hank remains in jail and It remains unseen. Now at school and during gym period, the crew tries to understand why the adults couldn't see It, as Lily brings up that maybe It was basically toying with them instead of killing them. Now, like his future son did, we see Will suggest they dig into Derry's history. As Ronnie brings up Lily's mom having grown up in Derry and if she's experiencing anything, but we see Lily shoots this down because she's afraid that her mother's going to send her back to the asylum. But here's where my prediction last week comes into play, as Lily comes up with the idea talking to her friend, the head of the housekeeping of the asylum. We now find Lily at a diner as she's set up to sit down with her friend who we met in last week's episode. She's the one adult who seems to actually listen to Lily and believe her stories. And in Lily's increasingly isolated world, that trust is everything to her. Now, the housekeeper recalls some of the kids going missing in the 30s when she grew up, but everyone put it down to the Great Depression. Families were breaking up, people were leaving town to find work. No one really wanted to look too closely into why these kids went missing during the 30s. Now, despite the odds being stacked against them, the housekeeper suggests that Lily and her friends keep digging for what they're looking for because her father would always say to her,
"My father always said to me that with good friends at your side, anything's possible." And it sounds like you have those.
Now, in my last breakdown, I mentioned how the little girl we saw dressed up as a clown might be Bob Gray's daughter and was like the early inspiration of It, using Pennywise as one of its forms. Now, I also mentioned how I believe the housekeeper might have had a run-in with It when she was younger, but now I'm thinking about combining both of those ideas. What if the housekeeper isn't just an adult who believes Lily? What if she's the little girl we saw dressed up as a clown and she's Bob Gray's daughter? Think about it. Her constant encouragement to Lily, her mysterious lack of a full name, and her cryptic mentions of her dad. What if her dad isn't a human father, but it's It itself in the human form of Bob Gray? This woman, this seamlessly trustworthy adult, could secretly be helping her father, It, orchestrate all these events. She's the only adult who truly believes Lily precisely because she's a part of It's plans. Lily being the most tragic character in the show, it would make sense that the one person, the one adult she trusts, ends up being evil. Now, meanwhile, across town at the Hanlon household, we find Charlotte reading the newspaper about Hank and the recent tragedies of the missing kids as she gets a knock at the door, and it's Rose. Rose is accompanied by her nephew, Tanya, who brings the item Charlotte purchased to furnish their new home. Now, as they're having a conversation, Rose shares some of her family's long history within Derry. But beneath the friendly chatter, it's safe to assume that Rose was also hoping to get some information about Leroy and his role in the digging sites. Charlotte shares her worries with Rose about the recent tragedies with the theater and the kids. Now, Rose tells Charlotte that while Derry is a beautiful place, it does come with some unexplainable things and suggests that she keep her loved ones close and gives Charlotte her number to call her if she ever needs someone to talk to. Rose's words were meant to be comforting, but they carried an unsettling weight. The scenes we've seen so far of Charlotte watching that kid being jumped, the kids going missing, Hank's situation, these are all things that are pointing towards something being bigger at play in Derry, and Charlotte is starting to take notice of it. Now we cut to a decommissioned military base where Shaw kept his word and found Hollerin and his friends a spot to finally call their own. But it's in this base that is a dangerous area. It's here we get the beginnings of what we've been talking about for weeks now, and that's the beginning of the Black Spot. Now this place is rough, but they see the potential as they make their plans of cleaning it up and making a bar and having a spot to play some music. This place is meant to be their sanctuary. Now while his friends are celebrating the future, we see this heavy look on Dick Hollerin's face. He's sensing something bad, something deeply wrong about this place. Now for those that haven't listened or watched my breakdowns in the last few weeks, I'm going to give you all a spoiler warning here because I'm going to explain why we see this look on Dick's face. Now, for those that might have forgotten the deeper lore from the book, and we spoke about this weeks ago, the Black Spot was a nightclub built for mostly black soldiers from the nearby army base. Now, in the novels, it was tragically burned down by a white supremacy group, and a young Dick Hollerin, who worked in the kitchen, barely managed to escape. Now, if you all remember, in the 2017 film, it established that a racist cult was responsible for a similar outcome in 1962, where we know this story is taking place. So putting all that together on top of the fact that Hollerin surprised it in his lair last week and the government planning to use it as a weapon, it's safe to assume that it will find a way to get his revenge for messing with it by having an influence on what happens to the Black Spot. Meanwhile, back at the school, we get more of the setup for not just the personal trauma factoring into its powers, but also the societal fear that's going on during this time. As we see the kids watching a video detailing the safety precautions needed for a potential nuclear attack. I predict that this constant and community-wide fear of total annihilation, this nuclear paranoia that has a hold on the country and in Derry at this particular time, will definitely be something that it can and will use against the people of Derry on a much larger scale at some point this season. Now, within this scene, we also get a quick but important emotional beat here. We see Lily looks back across the classroom at Marge. It's subtle but shows us that Lily misses her best friend, suggesting a vulnerability or sadness that could easily be exploited by someone like Patty, as we'll see later. Now the school day is over as Will rushes inside to look at the photos he hid away from the night at the cemetery, but his mom found them and demands to know what's really going on. Will, desperate and scared, explains Ronnie's difficult situation and then tells her a more believable and grounded version of what happened at the cemetery. He tells his mom that someone came after them and breaks down crying. Charlotte, being the incredibly concerned and responsible parent, she rightfully restricts Will's movement to just going to school and back home. No more late night activities, no more late night adventures with the others. Now later that evening at the dinner table, we get a moment of levity as Charlotte embarrasses Will bringing up his crush on a girl, and that girl being of course Ronnie. Now Will gets permission to head upstairs to finish his homework as Charlotte suggests that Leroy and Will spend some much needed father and son time together over the weekend to bond a little bit more. Now that next morning we see Leroy decides to take Will fishing. They have a good laugh about Will's crush and they're having a good time as Will almost catches a fish, but it takes the bait and escapes. Now Leroy heads back to the car to grab some more bait, leaving Will alone in the water. Will sees a fish swim towards him and he looks down. And out of nowhere, a hand grabs him from underneath the water and pulls him down. It's it in the form of his father, and his face is burnt and scarred up. As it tells Will, now we'll later find out that this is a fear of Will and that being his dad dying in a plane crash. But also, this being a reference to the established film canon set in It Chapter 1, where Mike Hanlon's parents, his dad being Will, unfortunately died tragically in a fire when he was a child. It is using Will's present fear and isolation to deliver a horrific prophecy of his future fate, which will become Mike's defining trauma. It is starting the cycle of tragedy early. Now Leroy rushes back and saves Will, trying to understand what just happened. Will tells him he saw his father burnt up and pulled him under the water, as Leroy notices marks left on Will's wrist and his arms. Now, in a look of pure fear, Will looks over his father's shoulder and sees a single red balloon floating in the air. Now, this is a key moment because it appears that Leroy sees this too. But remember, Leroy is incapable of showing any signs of fear due to his injury, so was that balloon released by a human? More on that a little bit later. Now, after what Will told her and after seeing the story in the newspaper about Hank potentially being falsely accused, Charlotte's activist background takes over, as she pays a visit to the police station to see how she can help. Charlotte requests that she speak to Hank, but Bowers immediately denies her access, and his suspicions of her motives is obvious. Now, after leaving the station, we see Charlotte is determined as she finds Hank's number in the phone book and visits his house, managing to speak to his mother about how she can help out. Now, Hank's mother confirms that Hank wasn't home that night and he was out walking. She tells Charlotte only Hank and God are the only ones who know what Hank was doing that night. But as we'll talk about later, someone else knows what Hank was doing that night. Now, back with Hollerin, we see that him and his crew are making progress on a new spot, but the relative calm is about to change. We see Hollerin steps outside to throw out some trash, and it's here he gets a psychic call from beyond the grave from his grandmother. The message gives us some quick flashes. We see blood around a drain, we see the cosmic energy of the deadlights, we see a door being kicked open, and his grandmother near a fire. Her message is cryptic, but it's also clear.
You want yourself here? Keep that lid on tight.
Now, as the vision fades, we see Hanlon arrives. Hanlon's still shaken up from the scare involving Will and wants to know everything Dick knows about the project Shaw's running. Hanlon shares the details with Hollerin of what happened on the fishing trip and what Will saw. But unfortunately, Hollerin can't offer much clarity.
Answer me! I don't know! I don't know what the hell it is. Hell, I'm not sure I want to know. Look, I do what I'm told, just like you.
Now, going back to that message sent from his grandmother. Was his grandmother's warning about the black spot? Was it talking about it itself? Or perhaps the government's interference or something else entirely? Now, I don't know if you all knew this, but back when Dr. Sleep came out in 2019, Mike Flanagan also wanted to do, I believe it was either going to be a movie or a TV series following the adventures of Dick Hollerin. So I am to assume that maybe the creators of the show is taking maybe some of those ideas that Mike Flanagan wanted to do in that movie and show and implementing it in this show. So I am really enjoying all this backstory between Dick Hollerin and his family with his grandmother, and really excited to see where all this goes. Now, back with the kids, Will shares with them his nightmares and his fear of his father dying in the plane crash, and how would it know those details is a mystery to them. Now, Will comes up with the idea that maybe it doesn't want to kill them, or at least not yet. Now, this is why Lily is one of my favorite characters in this show, because she brings up, as I've been talking about for weeks now, she believes that Maddie might still be alive out there, shout out to her, as they talk about how Maddie saw things before he was taken, as they also bring up Phil and Teddy seeing the same thing. This being its strategy, build up his victims' fears before taking them out. Now, Will explains the physiological components about what it does.
They're called the fear hormones. When you get scared, not just you, any mammal, your adrenal gland secretes them into your bloodstream, which some predators like the taste of.
Now, knowing this, what exactly can one do? Is there a way to avoiding being afraid? That brings us to Lily's locker, where they take a single pill that Lily mom takes, and her mom calls it Mommy's Little Helper. She uses these pills to relieve her fears, but also to take her troubles away. We watch the crew all agree to take this pill if and when they encounter it again. A horrifyingly dangerous pack trading potential addiction for temporary psychological armor. Now, for you all that do not know, this is actually reference to something that happened in our reality, that being called the happy pills. Introduced in the 1950s, this was the first blockbuster psychotropic drug in the US. However, by 1970, it was reclassified as a sedative and considered a controlled substance due to the risk of dependence, and its market was largely replaced by Valium. Meanwhile, back in class, the students watch a video about a parasite getting into a snail and causing the snail's eyes to swell. Remember this detail for later in relation to Marge's fear on her eyes. It's also important to note that the teacher's lesson being about how predators and parasites take on different forms to lure their victims, this being a direct nod to its methods. Now, sticking in the classroom, we see Marge invites Lily to share lunch together later on, and we can clearly see this is part of some prank made up by Patty and the Patty Cakes to mess with Lily, as Marge continues to want to fit in with the cool kids despite knowing that Lily, who is her best friend, is going through a lot. Now, at lunch, we watch the prank begins. As Marge brings up how her and Lily have been best friends since the first grade and she would love to start over. Now, Lily agrees, and we see this popular kid by the name of Tim walks by and says hi to Lily, and Marge plays it up and suggests she talk to him. Poor innocent Lily falls for it as she heads to the restroom to freshen up before talking to Tim. We see the Patty Cakes come over to Marge to assure that everything is going according to their plan. Marge goes to the bathroom to rush Lily, who's nervous, and before heading back, she uses the restroom. Now we can see Marge starts to feel guilty and appears to want to tell the truth to Lily, but all of a sudden, her head starts to hurt. Suddenly, her eyes start to bulge out of her head like she saw in the video she watched in class earlier, but also remembering Marge has a fear about her new glasses making her eyes look big, and we saw that back in episode 1. Now Lily tries to reach for the pill to give to Marge to stop making her afraid, but she accidentally drops it in the toilet. Marge now blindly running in the hallway, but she manages to make it to the woodshop room, and she begins to remove one of her enlarged eyes, but it regrows immediately. Meanwhile, Lily grabs the pill and chases after Marge. In a desperate, self-mutilating attempt to relieve the pressure, we watch as Marge finds a metal saw machine and uses it, slicing one of her enlarged eyes out of her socket. The wound immediately regrows, proving that the horror isn't external, instead is internal, driven by it. As we see, blood is squirting everywhere. Now, Marge tries to take a tool to remove her eye again, but Lily takes it out of her hand, and unfortunately, the screaming up and down the hallways has drawn every student and teacher to the scene. They see Lily covered in blood, holding the metal saw tool, standing over Marge, and it looks like she was trying to kill her after cutting her eye out, making her look crazy. Again, this looks pretty cut and dry to an outsider. Lily, or as they call her, Loony Lily, finally snapped. Unless Marge explains she inflicted the trauma on herself, it appears that Lily is going straight back to the asylum. Now, I shared my criticisms last week about the terrible CGI, but this being the same director from last week, I gotta say this, I thought that even though this was gross to look at, the scenes with the eyes, but this was a much better CGI heavy scene than what we got in that cemetery last week. Now, personally, I have a thing with things getting poked in people's eyes in movies and shows, so it freaked me the hell out. But let me know in the comments, what did you all think about this scene? Did it work? Did it not work? Let's talk about it in the comments below. Now, our focus switches over back to Derry Police Station. Charlotte, having secured permission from Hank's mother, arrives ready to see Hank. And like before, she's initially denied by another police officer. But Charlotte ain't taking no for an answer. She looks the officer dead in his eyes and tells him that if she is denied access, one phone call will fill Derry streets with activist groups, legal observers, and influential figures like Martin Luther King Jr. and John F. Kennedy, all to protect Hank against this injustice. And it actually works, as the officer lets her see Hank. Once inside, Charlotte quickly lays out the plan. Hank's due process was violated. They will fight for his release awaiting trial, not just for his innocence, but because his civil rights were tampered with. But before they can proceed, Charlotte needs the truth. What was Hank doing that night? Slowly and painfully, knowing that he might not see his family or get his freedom again, we see Hank confesses. He wasn't committing a simple crime. He was with a married white woman. Not that I need to remind you all, but it is the 1960s in America and we're in Derry. This isn't just a scandal, it's a death sentence. Being a black man and found with a white woman during this time is often a charge far worse and more feared than anything jail can throw at a black man. But as it pertains to the story, the question now being, who was the white woman? Could it be Mrs. Kirsch? Now, if my theory holds true and the housekeeper is the daughter of Gray and now she's older, she could potentially be married to Stan Kirsch. Y'all remember him at the butcher shop we met a couple episodes ago? And she no longer goes by the last name Gray. Now, this being the less likely scenario. Moving into a higher level, what about Lily's mom? Her husband died recently, less than a year ago, but maybe a lingering connection or shared grief over losing a partner bonded her and Hank into a secret romance. I would say this has a 70% chance because I think about Ronnie coming over to Lily's house, banging on her door. When Lily's mom answered the door, she knew exactly who Ronnie was, and she also mentioned her grandmother. Now, of course, this is a small neighborhood, but I felt like maybe Lily's mom knew more about Ronnie, again, alluding to her and her dad being in a romance. Now, this probably is the best option, that being someone else entirely. Maybe it's Marge's mom, or Phil's or Teddy's mom. Another wild idea, maybe it's Matt's mom. That would explain why maybe Matt was running away from home because maybe his dad found out and there was domestic abuse going on after finding out that she was having an affair, but not knowing it was with a black man. Or it could be someone else entirely, and maybe we'll never find out the identity of this woman. But regardless, Hank's secret lover is secondary to the immediate danger that Hank faces if this secret comes out. Meanwhile, back at the military base, General Shaw learns that Rose's recommendation she sent them was bogus, a deliberate wild goose chase. Shaw knows he doesn't have much time and understands the reality. The 27-year cycle is nearing its end. Its window is closing and so is theirs. Desperation is setting in. Shaw needs information and he needs it fast. And this is where Taylour comes into play, as his knowledge of the land is something that Shaw needs as he orders Filler to gather him for questioning. Now, to assure success, Shaw brings in his biggest weapon they have right now, and that's Dick Hollerin and his unique connection to the Shine. Now, the fight for civil justice comes at a cost, especially for Leroy Hanlon. He confronts his wife about her visit to the jail, reminding her of her past process that led to her being arrested at some point. Leroy is focused on his career with the government, and he needs her to promise to stay out of trouble. As Charlotte promises, assuring him that she won't jeopardize his future, but it's clear that she will continue to help Hank. Now upstairs, we find Will is having a hard time sleeping because he can't stop thinking about what happened while fishing. Seeking a distraction, he looks into his telescope around the neighborhood. Now, nothing crazy's going on. He sees a guy walking his dog, but out of nowhere, he sees what appears to be Pennywise looking back at him as he screams and gets his parents' attention, thinking that someone's watching them now after what Charlotte did, as we watch Leroy outside yelling at his neighbors to come out. As he walks back inside, he hears something in the tree, and it's a red balloon. Now, I said it appears to be Pennywise, but what if it isn't Pennywise? You'll notice when Leroy was yelling in the streets, we got a POV of someone hiding in the corner somewhere and watching him from afar. We ain't never seen Pennywise look at someone from that POV before, so I'm thinking this is someone else. Again, this goes back to my theory about the housekeeper being Gray's daughter. Maybe that was her dressed up just like Pennywise, just like she did when she was a kid at the fair. And she's helping Pennywise by leaning on Lily and continuing to have her look for it and now scaring Will. All this building up their fear levels. One of the key things I think it might be her, and it might be that kid. Remember the hairstyle that kid dressed up as a clown? It's the same that we saw in the photo, and it's the same that we see in this scene. I don't recall ever seeing the real Pennywise hair being styled like that, especially the trailers that we've seen. Pennywise hair looks nothing like that. It looks like the way we've seen Pennywise in the 2017 and 2019 film. Now, to also support my theory, Leroy saw the balloon earlier at the lake and he's seeing the balloon in the tree, but he's yet to encounter it, and we know he doesn't have any fear, so it can't be in his head. So to me, that balloon at the lake and that balloon now in the tree, this to me means that a real person planted it there. Now, of course, this could 100% be Pennywise, but I really do believe that the housekeeper is dressed up as Pennywise and she's involved in all this is going on. Cut to the next morning, Hanlon is tired of the secrecy as he goes straight into Shaw's office demanding to know what they're chasing. We see Shaw leads him to a room where we see Taylour is handcuffed to a table as Hollerin walks in. This is Shaw's plan to use Hollerin's shine to extract the location of it. Now, Hollerin tries to plead with Taylour, urging him to simply tell Shaw what he needs to know so he doesn't have to go through this pain. But Taylour responds with what I consider to be one of the most disrespectful things you could do to a person as he spits in Hollerin's face. Hollerin doesn't respond in anger, but instead he apologizes to him. As we watch him grab his head, channeling his powers like Charles Xavier from the X-Men, he uses his third eye to plunge himself deep into Taylour's memories, ready to extract the secrets of Derry. Hollerin now in Daniel's mind and sees a bunch of doors that represent his memories. He eventually finds the right memory door and enters into the moment that will help out Shaw. Inside, we find the kid Tanya with a young Rose here to discuss the monster in the woods. She makes him tell the story about it, or as they call it, Galoo, all began, as we watch the origins of how their ancestors fought for years against Galoo, aka it. Millions of years ago, their first ancestors made contact with the monster's star, which was its cage, as they used part of the star as a weapon, which held power over it, and they used it to protect themselves from the Galoo monster. The legend of the Galoo was passed down from generation to generation, and for many years, there was peace. It was known to never go into the monster's area in the woods, but unfortunately, that would change. The settlers arrived and didn't take heed of the natives' warning about what lies in the woods, as the settlers were all brutally murdered and fed on, making the Galoo stronger and was now able to hunt beyond the woods. The single stone would no longer be enough to protect the natives, and the decision was made to leave their land. But the warrior Seski's daughter didn't want to leave and took the stone and made the decision to revisit the cave in which it landed to gather more of the sacred material with her and her friends to protect the evil that threatens their people. Seski saw that her daughter and others have left the tribe, so she sent out a rescue team, including herself, to find them, but unfortunately that meant that they didn't have anything to protect themselves against the Galoo. In the woods, the warrior and her team encountered it in its many forms of the things the warriors feared the most, as they were immediately taken out one by one, leaving the fierce warrior by herself. We watch as Seski goes toe-to-toe with it, but ultimately is overpowered and held in the air by it as this tiny creature burst out of its chest and stabbed Seski in the chest. Now, Seski's daughter, Nakani, with the stone in hand, forced it to run away, but unfortunately, her mother dies. Nakani, Seski's daughter, went on to gather more of the stone for protection in the cave. A plan was made to not kill it, but instead cage it. We watched as they circled the outer edges of the woods, and they buried the 13 pieces that they found in the stone around the woods in order for it to not leave the woods ever again. Now, you all will notice that one of the stones were buried in a turtle shell, this obviously being yet another nod towards Matern the turtle. As we see the smoke in the air, marking the place where the line was created to keep it from escaping, and a promise was made at that time to keep this secret forever. Now, Daniel completes this story and Rose congratulates him, but she freezes as Hollerin claps and has Daniel show him where to find the hidden pillars. Hollerin is told to follow the tunnels of the old well and he'll find the pillars. As we see, it's under the infamous Neibolt house. Now, that ending was a huge improvement from last week's. After brief flashbacks at It Chapter 1 and 2 and even in the season, we finally got to see a much larger version of how it crash landed on Earth a million years ago, and it explains why it wasn't able to leave the woods, as we found out in last week's episode. And we also know that this was the secret that Rose must have told Shaw when they were kids. This puts a better understanding to Shaw's plan. Find one of, if not all, 13 pieces of the sacred stone to capture it and of course use it as a weapon against the United States enemies. Now, I think it's pretty much a sure bet that after the little bit of little Easter eggs and hints and images of Pennywise, I'm going to go on a limb here and say that I bet that it is 100% guaranteed that we will officially see Pennywise live in the flesh in next week's episode, as I would assume that the government goes down to the sewers and will F around and find out. So overall, I got to give props to the director, who again was the same director who directed last week's episode, which again, I liked last week's episode, like the story and the characters, but the scares didn't work and the CGI was terrible. But fast forward to this week. Marge's eye scene was done well. The backstory, seeing it mutilate and destroy and kill all those people, all executed very well. Now, the thing that's been consistent in all 4 of these episodes is my level of investment in the story, but more importantly, its characters. I really enjoyed what we saw with Charlotte's side mission and freeing Hank in this week's episode. Speaking of Hank, this whole new mystery of who he's having a secret affair with and this white woman is very intriguing. The kids trying to figure out it and all their personal developments, and characters like Will and Ronnie, and of course Lily again being the most tragic character that's currently on television. Again, we are 4 episodes into this season and I am enjoying myself. There's been, minor criticisms and issues, but overall, the story's working, the characters are working. The CGI has its moments, but I'm really enjoying myself, and I am excited to see what happens next. With all that being said, I think that's a great place to end this week's breakdown of episode 4 of season 1 of It, Welcome to Derry. Now, the big question is, what did you all think about this episode? Let me know your thoughts, your theories, your predictions of the weeks ahead. What deeper meanings, what Easter eggs, what was your favorite moment? What did you think about the CGI? What did you think about the backstory of it? Let's talk about it all in the comments below. Thank you all for watching or listening to this week's breakdown. If you all have made it to this point in the breakdown, I want to thank you all so much for the support. Do me a favor, the secret word of the week to put in the comments right now is #3rdeye. Now, if you all enjoyed this week's breakdown, do me a favor and hit that like button. And when you're on YouTube and you hit the like button, a hype button is going to pop up, which spreads this video to more viewers. So do me a favor, hit the like button, hit the hype button. I would appreciate it. Also, if you all could share this video to anyone and everyone you know that loves talking about this show, I would appreciate that as well. And last but not least, if you're having a good time, if you've been watching these videos and haven't subscribed, do me a favor, come and join the community, subscribe to the channel where we don't only talk about It, Welcome to Derry, we're covering Pluripus, we're covering all the new movies and all the different TV shows coming out, so subscribe for more videos just like this. Now, if you all are listening to this breakdown via Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I appreciate all my listeners, my podcast listeners out there. Please do me a favor and share this podcast. Leave your thoughts about this episode in the comments below. Put the secret word in the comments now, but also follow the podcast. Leave me a rating and a review. I would so much appreciate the support. Alrighty, y'all. Until next time, remember you all are awesome. Stay safe out there. And please don't be like Marge. Don't stick things in your eye. Alrighty, y'all. Stay safe, and I'll see you soon.